Right, it's Steve Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to continue our discussion on negativity and then positivity, and then we'll get to neutrality. But following our chat last time around, someone reached out to me and asked me a question that reminded me that I did a whole program on negativity for IBM all over Europe, I don't know, a good 7-8 years ago. So I thought, you know what, maybe I'll just pull up the deck from that and go through it very quickly just to see if it gives any additional insights to what's going on in the world of negativity. And I remember, if I remember correctly, this module for their training course was actually about attitude. And we were talking about a negative attitude. But let me go ahead and put this into a bit of a slideshow mode. Oh, hello, oh, very large. So the question again, I always try to give them a couple of minutes of tension management insights. And so I said, where does negativity live? And as we talked about last time around, tends to live at the 4 extremes along the change grid. So upgrade, outgrid, downgrade, ingrid. Negativity results when people have too much or too little tension and or too much or too little drive to follow through and do whatever needs to be done or they wanted to get done. So I thought, well, there's an interesting definition, because David brought up last time around, is it really driven more by tension, or because it seems like it's more something that comes up in an upgrade situation or a downgrade situation? So what about ingrid and outgrid? And one of the things that came up in this follow-up discussion I had with one of our colleagues was that negativity changes quickly, or rather, how about this? Attitude changes very quickly on the vertical axis and quite slowly on the horizontal axis. So yeah. So I think that's kind of it. It takes time to move out grid, because you have to not only have an increased perception in your level of ability, or an increased level of ability in practical terms, you also have to go out there and now put it to the test with a higher level of challenge. If a challenge doesn't go up as ability goes up, you move where on the grid?
Up.
Okay, we'll do that again. So if your ability is going up but the challenge is going down, where do you end up on the grid?
Down.
Down, exactly, where the flip is also true. If my ability never goes up but the challenge does, I'm going to end up up grid, up in stress. And so for me to stay on this methodical growth plan, there's this balancing act that has to occur to keep me in power, or certainly tight to the heart line of power. And I think that takes a lot more thought and maybe a lot more planning, but it's not going to happen instantly. Where moving upgrid or downgrid, how fast do you think you can move someone upgrid or downgrid?
Well, upgrade pretty quickly. Downgrade, I don't know.
Yeah, downgrade would definitely be slower, but downgrade is the more natural movement on the change grid,
Right.
because so we've always got nature kind of stimulating that one. But we say it as a joke, but it's true. If I pull a weapon on somebody, they're going to move up grid, and I can administer any combination of drugs and alcohol, you will go down grid. So there are things we can do rather quickly, but these would be inappropriate, perhaps even illegal in a business sort of a setting. But anyway, so I thought, like, lo and behold, I have talked about this before. So tension and drive. I always threw in concept soup. I don't know if you guys do concept soup when you're teaching any of your programs, but concept soup is a collection, a bowl full, if you will, of random thoughts and quotes and whatever that you think apply to whatever your subject at hand happens to be. So periodically throughout all my programs, I try to give people a little bowl of concept soup. So here's some of the concepts for attitude. There's a big difference between logical negative assessment and being negative. And I think we talked about this last time around, where Brian brought up the idea about toxic negativity versus, did you have a positive identifier for that? I know we probably just called it logical negative assessment, but there's a benefit to critical thinking. So I don't think we came up with another name for opposite of toxic. But nevertheless, a big difference between logical negative assessment, which isn't being negative at all. It's simply identifying and acknowledging that certain challenges exist. And by acknowledging them, we are far better equipped to actually prepare ourselves to manage them more effectively. So we're not wallowing in self-pity and all that sort of stuff that might come along with being negative. Negative situations do exist, but negative attitudes are optional. Maybe it's my personality, I don't know, but I am perfectly able to acknowledge that a negative situation exists and have no real emotion about it one way or another. I can maintain a certain level of neutrality, objectivity when a negative situation is brought up. Maybe that's why I'm a decent consultant, because I don't get sucked in to the client's drama. I'm just there, again, practicing that art of caring detachment, where I can observe that a negative situation does in fact exist, but I don't need to have any negative attitude about that situation as the outsider. And certainly their negative attitudes aren't really helping them deal with a negative situation. Thoughts about that? Have you guys encountered plenty of people who get sucked in to the negative situation and end up becoming?
Yeah, I think that's what makes us valuable, T, because when I think someone's in a situation, it's hard to see yourself out if you're drawn into it.
That's right. That's right. In fact, Diane explained this to an audience on one of the cruise ships that I thought she put it together in a very quick way. Because again, these are cruise passengers. She's not going to turn her 45-minute lecture into a lesson in neuropsychology and brain physiology and all that. She keeps it really light. The woman is hysterically funny. And so she's keeping it as light and still trying to teach people something. And she said, norepinephrine is interesting because it's kind of, wherever it is, it can't be elsewhere. So, and the way that she illustrated them, it says that if your upper brain is engaged, so you're being all very logical and practical and thoughtful and all the things that come along with being in your cortex, that norepinephrine is busy. And so it therefore is not readily available for the limbic system, the amygdala, to hijack. The corollary is also true. If all of your norepinephrine is being preoccupied by things going on in the limbic system, it is not possible to be logical in that time. And she, of course, said there's plenty of in-between situations where you've got a bit of a blend of different activities in the different areas of the brain. But nevertheless, wherever you got activity, there's going to be a corresponding area of inactivity. So Brian, you want to weigh in on that? Yeah.
She's exactly spot on. The norepinephrine and dopamine and epinephrine are all called CATs, and so they help balance.
Yeah, Brian, your audio stuff is really, your audio is real messed
so
up.
they're very.
Yeah, you're coming and going, Brian.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're catecholamines, and so they act as neuromodulators, basically. So they're very busy.
Yeah, and that was her whole point. It's kind of like if you're dealing with someone who's in this very negative kind of mode or being very difficult or challenging, you can try to be logical with them or try to get them to become logical. And it's like, best of luck, because that's a totally different part of the brain. And right now, their limbic system is the one that's kind of hijacked, if you will, the neurotransmitters of we're chatting about there. Yeah. Okay, so negative situations do exist. Negative attitudes are optional. A negative mindset doesn't lead to a positive outcome. And again, if you want to throw in anything as I give you the little bowl of soup, feel free, but negative mindset doesn't lead to a positive outcome. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Negative people don't recognize when they're being negative. So I'm assuming your silence is all I'm getting amens from the crowd. You're 100% responsible for your responses to the situations you encounter. Let's chat about that one. How many of you have dealt with plenty of clients and situations where people want to blame other people for the way that they feel? Anybody? Nobody? Is it just me?
Oh, sure. We've all run across that in our lives, and it's important to center that person and get them, to a better place.
Right. And I think that's, now, have you found yourself actually saying to people, whatever's going on in the world around you, whatever's happening with whoever it's happening with, the bottom line truth is that you are 100% responsible for your responses in this situation.
Yeah.
So blaming other people for the way you feel is inaccurate and is pointless. So let's change the way you feel, because changing their behavior is a totally different project. So yeah. So I often find when we're dealing with, usually it's, again, because I was a business consultant, it's a business kind of situation where I go like, lesson number one is how to go about managing your own responses. So before you try to have impact on other people's behavior, let's make sure you can get your own responses under control, and then that'll better equip you to do the real work, if you will, of trying to change the situation. Thoughts about that? Anybody? An amen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so
Amen.
much. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Now this comes from Dale Carnegie. The first three: don't criticize, condemn, complain. We talked about that before. But this other one about don't share horror stories, that was put in here uniquely because of a pattern identified at IBM, where no matter what opportunity might be coming up for these people in various areas of the company, it was amazing how quickly someone else would decide to share a horror story about when that didn't work or what they encountered or whatever the bloody aftermath might have been. So I specifically put it there, don't share horror stories. For them to get that as well, take it to another. And I love this quote. I don't know where it came from, probably a greeting card somewhere. But, and then the day comes when you realize that the only consistent factor in all of your frustrating, disappointing, and dysfunctional relationships is you. So, got to take some responsibility. And then this is my personal favorite. Everyone is entitled to a little baggage. And I actually say this to an audience if we're going to be talking about more emotionally charged kind of situation. I'll say, look, every one of us is entitled to a little bit of emotional baggage. But unless it fits under the seat in front of you or in the overhead compartment, you need to check it at the door. So, and it gets a chuckle out of them, but it kind of makes the point. We're all human. We're all going to have a little bit of baggage. But if we are like bringing in a whole cartload of crap, then we need to take the responsibility to set that aside, deal with it, personally, privately later. But we can't turn any kind of like business discussion into a personal therapy session. So Peter, and who else is on the call that does therapy? Well, several of you do. There's Edie, there's Pam. So how often do you have people in that come to you and you just kind of go like, well, you can have a little bit of baggage, but this is way over the weight limit for even check luggage. So,
Yeah, I think in a coaching standpoint, when they have too much baggage, I'm not sure that they're coachable.
I don't think they are either, because particularly if they want to drag you through the fully detailed history of everything bad that's ever happened to them, I always just kind of chuckle and just go, you do understand what you're paying me for every minute of listening to this, don't you? Because I don't need to hear the backstory to help you move from where you are to where you want to go. So interesting. I like Tim's comment, one free bag. That's what you get. One free bag. Maybe we should charge people an extra $30 for excess baggage when they come into our discussions. Okay, anywho, just again, some concept soup. The high cost of negativity. We talked a little bit about this. I wanted to share with you a specific additional thing from the Gallup study. I don't remember when this was, but it's got to be at least 10 years old because I did this presentation 7 years ago, and I forget what the time period was for the study. So it could be far worse by now. But according to a Gallup organization study, U.S. companies alone lose over $300 billion per year due to negativity. And as startling as that number may sound, if you read further in the project, it said that that's based on an estimate of the average American worker being negative for 10 minutes a day. Okay, how many of you have had coworkers, colleagues who are negative a heck of a lot more than 10 minutes a day? Yeah, so isn't that interesting? $300 billion per year
Like
lost.
every day.
Yeah, just amazing, amazing. And we talked a lot about this, about negativity affects our physiology, fatigue, depression, compromises the immune system, actually increases the chance of developing Alzheimer's, negatively spreads like an infection, drains the energy of everyone exposed, creates doubt, sustains discontent, and distorts reality. Right there, turn that into a poster. Negativity increases turnover, employee dissatisfaction, customer complaints, careless mistakes, missed opportunities, pointless bickering, inefficiency, and lawsuits. And then negativity reduces productivity, innovation, performance, motivation, creativity, and profit. And then I wanted to get around to this, that I believe that negativity is also a habit. It's a bad habit. And there are some things that we were all told to do if you wanted to snap out of the bad habit. You guys remember the whole rubber band thing? So I forget what that was went into, but some sort of like negative reinforcement. Yeah. All right. Now, I did just want to bring one more thing to your attention. We talked about this before. If you were if you went to positivepsychology.com, it might be .org. That's Seligman's website on positive psychology. There are it's Seligman with an S. There is a online little survey you can take that is actually designed to measure your level of resilience. But he was talking about that resilience is one of the most important attributes for someone to cultivate in order to counteract negativity. So I thought that was very interesting. But by the time you're done, it's going to tell you how optimistic you are, etc. And he said that negative beliefs tend to fall into three categories. Those are beliefs centered around a feeling of permanence, pervasiveness, and personalization. So I'll just quickly remind you guys, those of you who are on that call, that permanence is this structure. It's always been this way. It's always going to be that way. So there's no reason to feel or blah, blah, blah. Nothing's ever going to change. It's always been this way. It's always going to be that way. So that's a belief that permanence of a situation. Pervasiveness means that one thing leads to another and contaminates everything sooner or later. So, well, this happened to this, and now it's going to infect that, and then that's going to lead to this, and oh my gosh, you know, we're doomed before we even begin. So these are beliefs about pervasiveness. And then personalization is the belief that it's all your fault. So it all comes back to you. Well, interestingly enough, when we did this this exercise at IBM employees, and we probably profiled well over 1,000 of them over the course of this series, scored very low in, or rather, they scored well when it came to optimism around permanence. They didn't believe that things were forever. They didn't believe that things were pervasive. They believed things were actually far more contained than that. But they rarely much believed that it was their fault. And so we wanted to explore, how is it that they came to hold the belief that any of these struggles or failures were actually their fault? And it ended up revealing a cultural aspect of what's going on, accountability taken to an extreme and isolated to each individual. So there was no team failure. There was no conceptual failure. The competition had nothing to do with it. It was always your fault. And I thought that was a fascinating thing to look at. Thoughts about that? Yay, nay? All right. So again, if you want to see if you can find this, it's been many years, so maybe it's still up there, but do check it out.
Yeah, T, wouldn't this also mirror his work on optimism and pessimism?
Yeah. Well, in fact, if they still is the website he had when I found this one, there were dozens of these different tests, and they had some similarity because he definitely had one that was about where do you fit on the optimism to pessimism scale. But this particular one was under the category of resilience.
Yeah, he has a website called AuthenticHappiness.org. So it may
Oh,
be that he put everything into that one. That's more recent, I believe.
okay,
Authentic
yeah.
Happiness.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, he has since passed on. So
Oh, really? I didn't
I
know
think
that.
so. I mean, wasn't he already up in his years, even 7 or 8 years ago? I don't remember, but nevertheless, his body of work has been embraced, I think, strongly enough that it's going to have a lifetime after his, usefulness with it, or his time in this form on this planet is over. Okay, anyway, that's what I wanted to show you as far as my little talk I did with IBM. Hopefully you guys found that interesting. If you'd like this slide deck for any reason at all, just send me an email. More than happy to give it to you. Probably have to put it up on Dropbox or something just because of the size of it. All right. Now, we talked last time around about all these points about negativity, but then we got to two things. David mentioned about what was the neurochemistry of each of these locations. And we threw out there, just as a closing comment, that in all likelihood, negativity that's encountered in the upgrade danger zone would have a very different neurochemical soup than negativity that's experienced or displayed in the outgrade danger zone, and the other two for that matter as well. So I thought we might have a little bit more of a chat around that. And perhaps to set the stage for that, if we can talk a little bit about toxic negativity, maybe the way that the toxicity of negativity is experienced and displayed helps us to better identify what's going on neurochemically. So I'd like to throw this to you guys. How would you kind of define or characterize toxic negativity versus some more purposeful, practical, beneficial kind of negative assessment? Thoughts about that?
Well, it would seem to be a person who injects negativity into every situation they encounter.
Okay. And so we would say then that one of the hallmarks of toxic negativity is that it's like their default way of looking at the world and operating in the world.
I think it's divisive too, blaming and demonizing and that type of thing.
Okay, great.
I think about the slide that you put up earlier about negativity from your IBM program, where you talk about how it spreads. It's kind of like a disease, and it's catching. Yep. So that's how I think of it. And again, it can emerge from one individual or from several individuals if it's part of the culture, but it spreads and then tamps down positive approaches.
Excellent. Other thoughts you want to throw out, anybody?
I think the negative toxicity may focus almost exclusively on things that they can't control. So there's that overwhelming feeling of a loss of control, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely applies that there is an underlying question mark about the individual's ability to control the reality of that situation, or that situation as it's unfolding. Now, I decided, as I always do, to go out there into the world of Google and just said, well, what are some of the symptoms of toxic negativity? And it's amazing how frequently the number 7 was chosen for people putting these articles all together. So 7 warning signs, 7 symptoms, 7 types of toxic people, 7 signs you have too many toxic people in your life, 7 signs it's time to cut a toxic person out of your life, on and on and on. And so I'm just going to rattle off some of these that are going to certainly reinforce what you guys have already shared, but maybe add a few more to the discussion. You can tell that a person is toxic if you're left feeling emotionally exhausted after an encounter with them.
Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of it, humans are beings of energy, and our energy is not very well insulated. So our energy can either be added to or pulled from us. And if you find that you are giving out a lot more energy than you're getting back, this is why a lot of people in our industry do very, very well in front of a live audience, but really struggle to be satisfied with what they do if it's an online presentation, because they're giving out all kinds of energy. They're relying on that audience to give energy back to them. I think this is particularly true for people that are professional speakers, because they are looking for that whole audience involvement and reinforcement of what's being said, where perhaps as professional trainers, we're more comfortable going into lecture mode, but nevertheless, we still have a tendency to see our audience, and we're picking up some kind of energetic feedback from them as well. All right, so next one, they try to intimidate you to get their way. Now, I want to go here for just a second. If we've got someone who's trying to intimidate us to get their way, where's their negativity living on the change grid?
Outgrid.
That's definitely an outgrid. Where when we looked at the first one, you're left feeling emotionally, you're left feeling emotionally exhausted. Upgrid people exhaust me on their best day. So outgrid people can exhaust me. Downgrid people, I don't know if they exhaust me as much as I'm just getting pulled into their boredom. But yeah, I can see how those would be maybe more upgrid and outgrid. How about this one? They try to control you by guilt tripping.
Would that be an in-grid person?
That could be an in-grid person. They wouldn't be as far in-grid as that powerless point on the far right side, but there's a lot of passive-aggressive guilt, the use of guilt in order to control other people. That tends to be one of these qualities. Yeah, interesting. Now, maybe the outgrid person, well, they're
I
quick
was
to
thinking
blame.
downgrade for some reason. I was thinking downgrade, like they would be annoyed, like you're not as smart or not as on point as they are, or knowing as they are.
Oh, yeah, because it is true. The people in the downgrade danger zone tend to be know-it-alls, and they want to wait to see people fail. If they get into an argument with someone who is also downgrid, it tends to be an argument questioning one another's information, one another's intelligence, something like that. So things can also get very petty down here. Yeah, don't get a whole bunch of academics arguing about something.
Because
So
wouldn't a
definitely
downgrade person be like, they be like the one that say, I told you so?
absolutely, they'll say, I told you so.
Downgrade?
Yep. They're waiting for you to do something that they can then say, see, I'm smarter than you are, I'm better than you are. But whatever. This may very well true for, well, I'll throw it, you guys tell me who it is. They are easily made jealous. They are easy to be made jealous.
I think that sounds in-grid as well.
Could be in-grid. I think there's kind of a jealousy there. Maybe there's some jealousy downgrid as well, because if you're in one of those battles of the intellect, you might wish that you'd read that book on whatever they're just quoting right then and there. So there might be this thing. In fact, we were watching an episode of some show, I forget which one it was, but this one character thought that he was the absolute best at something. So quite far downgrid. He decides to invite his girlfriend, who is very, very good at sports and other things, to come into his world where he assumes she will not be as good, and she blows him completely out of the water. And as a result, she gets all the accolades, she gets all the attention, she gets the roles, and he doesn't. And the bottom line there is that he feels very jealous. But that could be downgrade. That could also be he suddenly finds himself in a situation where, to compete favorably against her, he perceived his ability as being quite low and the challenge as being very high. So there could also be a little bit dancing on the barrier going on for jealousy. And if we go far out grid, how many of you know narcissists, and tell me whether or not you think narcissists are jealous when other people get attention, accolades, success, whatever,
Yeah,
Clearly.
they want it all for themselves.
all for themselves and nobody else can have it. So maybe there's an element of jealousy we're going to encounter at all four extremes, but I would imagine the conversation about the jealousy element would be very different depending on where we happen to be. They constantly see themselves as a victim. So they wouldn't be so negative if blah, 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 or everyone's doing this to them, or, you know, no one understands them. It's all other people's perceptual fault, as opposed to people taking some responsibility for their own role in their psychodrama. They give backhanded compliments. That feels very much like a downgrid
Yeah.
negativity behavior, maybe some outgrid, but very much a downgrid. They're overly defensive. I would imagine that's very much upgrid and outgrid. The difference is that the upgrid person feels threatened by the situation, so become very defensive about whatever that situation is. And the outgrid person becomes attacking of other people. And so they have to really defend their truth so that others have no option but to be viewed negatively. Yeah, so make up a lie, tell it loud enough, often enough, and defend it to tooth and nail. And it's an attempt to make other people look wrong. So I thought that was interesting. There's another one here from I Heart Intelligence. I don't know who comes up with the names of these things. Again, I don't judge. Just check it out, see what they say. These are what they say. The 7 signs that a friend or family member's negativity may be hurting you. And number 1, even good news is met with pessimism. So bright, sunshiny, positive day. Someone wants to raid on your parade. Bring ants to the picnic. They refuse to engage in wonder. So even if you're trying to do something that's upbeat and energetic and creative and all those good sorts of words, they don't even want to participate in that imaginative, creative kind of an exercise. How many of us have encountered that when we have audiences that always have that one person who's going to be a stick in the mud. They don't want to play the games. They don't want to participate. They don't want to whatever. And it really is just their negativity, their judgment, their whatever going on, but they refuse to engage in wonder. And so they don't get to have the wonder of it. And I like the example they give here. They're the person who can be out on a beautiful, brisk, sunny and bright autumn afternoon, surrounded by all the colors of those sugar maples, and they're busy complaining about the dampness in the air. So it's like, all right, don't be in the moment. They drain your energy. We talked about that. They find reasons to underachieve. So they decline promotions, they sabotage relationships. Where do you think that comes from? Brian, were you about to say something?
No, I just said, wow.
Yeah. Well, because then they can blame. It's actually a fear of success that might be at the heart of it. So the best way for you to never fail is to never try. And so,
Downgrid person.
well, it is very much a downgrade person because, again, they get trapped in that velvet prison. They have achieved a certain level of success and mastery. They can rest on their laurels indefinitely as long as they never step out of that area and try something new, because trying something new could result in them failing. And now their whole mythos is being damaged. Yeah. So even positive experiences are marked with negativity. So we actually have this experience with a number of people we've met in Sun City West, where they've decided the average person in Sun City West lives in 3 different places inside of Sun City West by the time they're done. So they actually move around, but they stay inside of Sun City West. And it's interesting how many of them will move into the bigger permanent home, because often they start off with a snowbird kind of a home. So just a small apartment kind of a thing to keep them warm for a few months, and then they go back to their life elsewhere. Well, when they decide to just stay here, they want to move into a larger home. And these are the people who move into this larger, beautiful home on a beautiful blah, blah, blah. And all they can do is talk about all the stuff that's wrong with the house, all the stuff that was better in the old house or whatever. So, so that's it. They refuse to grow personally. Growth comes from pushing the boundaries of one comfort zone. Who doesn't want to grow personally? It's the people that are downgrade negativity. They refuse to grow personally. And then they're always the victim. And we talked a little bit about that. Even the person in the outgrid danger zone can very quickly position themselves as being the victim. But certainly upgrid, victims of circumstances; in-grid, victims of their own lack of self-esteem, etc. But victims could be literally victims of the violence or the abuse that others are pointing towards them. And then downgrid, I don't know what they'd be the victim of. Anyone have an idea? Can you be a victim of your own success?
Sure.
A victim of others not recognizing it.
Oh, there you go. Right. So I'm so good. How come? In fact, right here on the change grid at coordinates 12 and 6, if you look at the adjective map, it says that this area is characterized by frustration and resentment, a feeling of being held back by people and situations. And it tends to be felt by people as they move into a higher and higher area of regard. They tend to be granted all kinds of permissions and flexibilities or whatever, and so people aren't paying much attention to them. We already know that people pay attention where they find their tension. You, if you're down here, you're not causing any tension, so you're not getting much attention, and that also means you're not being given developmental opportunities and new things to do. Slowly but surely, natural movement on the change grid is downgrade. You end up plopping further and further downgrade. So if this frustration and resentment isn't remedied right then and there with more opportunities for growth and engagement, it's going to move further and further downgrade until it becomes.
I see that as senior salespeople and senior like attorneys or accountants who've got their book and they just don't want to do anymore. They just want to ride their book.
Right, ride their book. And in all likelihood, the book is of substantial size and longevity that they believe it's going to feed them very, very nicely. So why should they?
Why is anybody pushing me to do more?
Right, right. So, hey, I'm meeting my quota. Why don't you pay attention to the people who aren't? So, yeah, so it's absolutely true, but it's all evidence that, we talk about this, that while the pursuit of mastery may be a great thing, the achievement of mastery is overrated because you end up downgrid. Yay, good for you. Do a happy dance. But then I hope that your brain would switch into okay, what's next kind of a mode. What's next? One of the things I was talking to Diane about was patterns in the kinds of clients that she tends to deal with versus the clients that those of us in coaching, consulting, or one of the other human development fields might deal with. And I think it's going to be different for each one of it, but here goes. Diane said that she tends to have a client population that comes to her in crisis. And so there they are, very upgrid, and she tries to help them move downgrid and wherever is more beneficial for them. She does not tend to have people seek her out that are too far outgrid, although she has had outgrid people assigned to her by the court system. To go through some sort of, exploration. Anger management issues whenever someone crosses a line in terms of their behavior in regard to other employees, and sometimes it's a company that says, look, you individual here, you need to deal with whatever these issues are before they become lawsuits and criminal behavior, when the court system will mandate whatever the therapy is. But she says, so generally her clientele seems to come to her because they're in a situation of very high challenge, even though they might report a range of ability to meet those challenges. And while the person who's upgrid desperately wants her help, the person who's very far outgrid might very much resent her help, or even resist it, question whether it's going to have any value whatsoever. And so I said, well, we certainly do get some of these people, but we get a lot of people that are downgrid, that recognize that they are not as engaged, they are not as fulfilled, they've been successful, and they want to go, what's next for them? These are people who are trying to reawaken that passion and desire. So we tend to help people who are slipping down grid to correct that movement, or we might even be trying to help people to prepare themselves for whatever the next level of challenge happens to be. Diane said she never gets these people. These people don't come to her.
Right.
So, and I don't think any of us get these in-grid people. We might learn about these in-grid people through conversations with the other three extremes. But generally speaking, the in-grid person does not want to draw any attention to themselves whatsoever. So they're very good at blending into the wallpaper, disappearing into the crowd. For them to seek us out might actually be a step into danger for them. However, if we were affiliated with any kind of a shelter sort of a situation, we may very well find ourselves in conversation with people who have been this abused person we're describing, and someone in our field, probably a licensed therapist or a licensed social worker, whatever, is trying to help them find whatever courage, self-esteem they need to be able to take back what's been taken from them.
Yeah, T, wouldn't it be a big risk for someone in grid to seek out help?
Heck yeah, it exposes them in a grand way, and they have a very long, what do we say, not habit, but experience of
History of hiding,
minimizing anything they can do to, because they know that for them, attention can result in abuse. So the less attention that is drawn to them, the less abusive they might be. Again, I think these are the saddest people on the whole change grid. Because no one should have that as their reality. But I would believe that for them to truly be helped, they might need law enforcement involved. They might need the judicial system involved. They might need very high level therapists, psychiatrists, whatever. I just don't really think that we would be able to be as effective with this population, and we would feel very comfortable passing them over to someone we really trust. Again, some of you are clinical psychologists, in which case, yay, hopefully you can help these people. But for a lot of us, that's just not something that we tend to encounter. Do you guys agree, disagree? Want to share any stories?
Yeah, I actually, I just completed all these management impact assessments with this organization in New York. I'll be going on Monday. I'll be gone all next week. And the accountant, the controller, and believe it or not, the head of claims, both had such limited extensions on their circumplexes.
Yeah.
They take good care of their people, but when it comes to interacting with anybody outside of their group, they're very, very skittish and standoffish, very introverted.
Yeah. In fact, we talked about this several calls ago about, I think it was a triangle about the dynamic in relationships, and someone needs to come along. If there's a victim and a perpetrator, someone needs to come along and be their ambassador, their hero. I forget all the different words we use to describe that. And it's interesting that you've just described people who would be either unable or unwilling to step into the role of the facilitator for their people, or beyond their people. You know what I mean? So is that, if
Yep.
I'm describing that correctly, it takes courage to be an agent of change. Yeah. It
Yeah,
made me
they
laugh.
seem to get stuck in their own little departments and have a lot of conversations with themselves. But when another department reaches out for help, they close in and
Mhm.
and ignore.
And what do you think is driving that?
They say they're so busy and that it's really not their responsibility.
Okay, and what do you think is under that? So yeah, yeah,
Broken relationships.
broken relationships, fear of repercussions. You know, it's
Yeah.
damaging. The messenger can get killed, so maybe they just don't want to lose whatever status, recognition, position, political position they have in the organization if they end up going to bat for somebody or something that they know is going to be met with resistance, if not outward opposition. Yeah. You know, things are screwed up everywhere you go. So we have to realize that people don't leave all the dysfunction and weirdness that they hold at home when they go to work. They bring it with them. And so they end up replicating those dysfunctional patterns in their own businesses. And so it's all going to end up ultimately, causing the same trouble you would find at home. So yeah. Okay. So going back to toxic negativity, what would you guys say is the way that you have dealt with toxic negativity in people around you? I will assume that none of you suffer from toxic negativity. You would never be on a call like this if you were someone who was really all about that. So obviously, this isn't you. But I have to believe you've encountered your fair share of people, whether they're friends, family members, coworkers, colleagues, or maybe even clients that ultimately reach a point where you go, this negativity is just plain toxic. So how did
T,
you recognize, what did you do? Yep, David.
when I run into that, I oftentimes think there's a chemical imbalance,
Yes.
Because toxic negativity lives in its own soup. And I don't run into toxic negativity too often, but when I do, I'm very concerned that that person may have a brain chemistry imbalance.
Well, I think building on that, high levels of cortisol, low levels of serotonin, it's akin to being depressed.
Yes.
And I think, T, to answer the question, I think boundaries is important for me. I left a toxic marriage, and I think setting boundaries and sometimes leaving it is a thing. If somebody is what you see is what you get, if they're a manager or somebody that is always going to be with you, that other choice is if you can't change it, then you might have to leave it if you can't set appropriate boundaries.
That's right. In fact, when we talk about dysfunction in the early stages of ChangeWorks training, I say that if you are in a dysfunctional situation, you are either going to be pulled in as a player in the psychodrama, or you need to leave. You need to escape it. Because there's no audience space in a toxic, in a dysfunctional psychodrama. So yeah. Now, anyone else want to share anything about your personal experiences with toxic negativity? Okay, then I've got a question for you. When would you actually bring their toxic negativity to their attention, and why? And when would you kind of go, nah, I'm just going to fade into the background, I'm just going to disappear, gently lose contact, etc. So when would you feel compelled to bring it to someone's attention, and why and how? I guess, yeah. Thoughts about that?
Could answer that. It's a lot of it is when people derail. It's a lot of times over that toxic negativity, And if they have, let's say, a leader who is really brilliant and capable, but toxic, sometimes that's when, okay, you're going to get coaching, or we have to rethink you being with us. And that's the time where that person is forced with, okay, I've got to go through coaching and a 360 feedback. And sometimes that mirror can help. But other times, if it's somebody low level or just a friend or so, they don't want to hear it. And that's the time to really put some boundaries or distance.
Yeah, and so going back to your first example, it sounds to me then that there would have been some form of intervention that occurred. So, because someone at some point had to sit down with this toxic negatoid and say to them, "You're a toxic negatoid." And
Yeah,
so
true.
there would have had to have been some sort of dialogue, and
Mhm.
then was that person willing to enter into the coaching, or were they put into a situation where, like a lot of interventions, you are going to go and check yourself in to the
Yeah.
residential, or
Well,
you're doing
I
it
think,
now? Yeah.
see, I think you said it best. I forget when, but this always stuck with me. I think you said one time, when the pain of not changing becomes greater than the fear of change, change occurs.
That's
And I
correct.
think, and that point is, well, I love my job, but if I keep behaving this way, I lose it, and that's unacceptable. So I guess, which is worse, talk to a coach or get fired? Usually the coach will win.
Yeah, yep. And so I brought this up because I wanted to just say that there are going to be certain points in time where intervention is going to happen, and whether that intervention is just you as a friend confronting another friend, or a family member confronting another family member, or you actually pull in a professional interventionist for whatever it is, sometimes that has to happen. Now, if that doesn't happen, so let's say that we're going back to one of these situations in a business setting where the employees really do know that their leader is toxic, but they never bring it up. What are they actually doing as far as that leader's behavior?
Well, they're unconsciously reinforcing it.
Right. And so that's my thought, going back to Peter's thought about boundaries. If I never bring it to the boss's attention, then I'm tolerating it. But what is the neurochemical cost to me of tolerating someone else's negativity?
Stress.
Right. And so if I mean, I'm going to end up with a high level of cortisol and everything negative that comes along with that, because I don't establish boundaries and exercise those boundaries. So you guys with me on what I'm saying about this? I think it's easy for someone to say, "Oh, I'm just going to ignore it. I'm just going to turn a blind eye to it." Well,
Oh, that's T.
yeah, that's just the way he is. It's just the way, we that's the way I was raised. Whatever. We're dismissing it. We are actually enabling that behavior, and the thought that there is no price tag paid by us as the ones who are granting that continuation of behavior is wrong. So that's what I wanted to throw out to everyone. So am I right or am I wrong that tolerating toxic negativity brings something onto you? Now, as Peter already said, or you can get out. It's okay, get out. But if you're going to remain in that situation and say nothing, what are the costs to everyone involved?
Yep.
Yeah. So now again, Diane's belief is that we should simply put an SSRI into the water supply, and everyone would be much more mellow as a result of all this. But I think this is an important thing. I wanted to bring it up because we do have a tendency to work with business situations. And in those business situations, the leader tends to be of one of those personalities, or often tends to be one of those personalities that carries with it a very high level of A-type behaviors, so aggressive, assertive sorts of behaviors. They can be highly, highly bossy and bullying and everything that comes along with that. They can be very narcissistic, everything comes along with all that. And they can be so judgmental about others that it reaches this point of toxic negativity. So what do you do when you've got a client that's like that, or you were brought in by someone who's further down the chain, but nevertheless, this is the way the CEO behaves?
I've had those engagements before where I've been called by a client and said, this person will go through coaching. And then I meet the person and maybe run a 360 and get the bad news. And, you do your best to try and develop and build that person to be more productive and more engaging. But that resentment of having to go through coaching, I don't think ever leaves.
No. It was forced upon
Most
them.
of it, I think, is because they're unconscious. See, like most of the time, our response, the human response to emotions, whether it's fear, anger, any of those kinds of things, it starts on a level of the system itself that's processing the sensory, right?
Yep.
So most of the time, they're unconscious and they're just responding to the system, to the mechanisms that are happening. So the heart palpitations, sweating, the breathing, that's what they're responding to. Because if you ask them, well, what is it that you're angry about? They can't necessarily pinpoint it.
Right.
They're going to start blaming all these different things, but it's not the thing. And so unless that comes to their attention, there's really nothing for them to actually address. And that creates some of that resistance. So it's like unpeeling the layers to get them prepared, and then they'll be more open. But that takes some time for them to just unravel the fact that, okay, what you're really responding to is the mechanisms of the system. Now let's deal with what you're really angry about.
Yeah. Now, let me add in that, because this is something that all came out of my 3 weeks with Diane. She would say to you, and again, she's a biochemical psychologist, so very big believer that your neurochemistry has got to be right, or you might be talking about nothing. Because she would say that if this person that has this toxic negativity and everything else that's coming along with it is only reasoned with in conversation, when you ask them what they're angry about, they may not be able to answer it, but the brain is tormented by an unanswered question. So it will come up with its own content. Even though the content is not based on anything that's really going on. So Diane would basically say that until this individual's biochemistry is addressed, then any energy that's being put into other forms of intervention, development, etc., may be a waste of time and energy that will aggravate the situation even further.
Because think about that. We talk about a person that is out grid, right? And so, that person, the stress hormone in terms of cortisol is created in the adrenal glands, right? So, they have adrenaline present. But there's something else, particularly dopamine, that's keeping them out there.
Yes.
And so that's going to be experienced at different levels depending on how far out they are. So they'll enjoy what they're doing, although they're suffering from it. That's the distortion that they're going through.
Yep.
Maybe, Brian, would you even say that they could become addicted to it?
Exactly. That's exactly it.
I was going to say that I think that the toxic negative person really feels like that gives them control.
Well, I think it does.
Yeah, it's a distortion.
Right. And it keeps their enemies at bay. Yeah. And of course, usually the people that are that far out grid are in a situation where they have positional power. So they can fire you, they can make life difficult for you in all kinds of ways. So you got to think twice before you really confront them. That's why I really do believe that every executive should sign an agreement when they go to work that at any time we can start giving them drugs without them knowing. So I'm just saying that might be unpopular, but I'm saying it would fix a whole lot of what's wrong with the world. So, put Zoloft in the water supply. That's what
I've heard, there's a psychiatrist and a dietitian. She wrote a book, This Is Your Brain on Food. And she found, that many foods we eat can act just like the drugs. So like cashews and bananas can influence serotonin. So maybe give these people cashews or have them eat a couple bananas a day.
Yeah, that's very interesting. When I was put on my my medication, which is called Pristique, I was told to watch out eating high amounts of cashews and bananas because of the how it will magnify serotonin.
Interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
But I said to him, I said, look, my dosage of Pristique is 25 milligrams. The recommended starting dosage is 50 milligrams, and the top dosage is 400 milligrams.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking I got a long way to go before I need to, monitor my cashew consumption. so, so there you go. Okay, anyway, that's our time for today. We will be moving on to positivity,
That's
which has got its own set of problems that goes along with that. So with that, thank you everybody
true
so
that
very
food
much.
does have a,
The food does have a,
thank you.
okay, yeah. All right, yeah, food does have an impact on neurotransmitters. There you
It
go.
does have a chemical action in the body.
Yeah, exactly right. Food is medication. Food is medication. Okay, take care, everybody. We'll talk again next week. Bye for now.
See ya. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.